So what we're going to be talking about over these next few weeks is we're starting a new series called Context Clues. And Context Clues, it picks up where we left off before. We did a series some time ago called Out of Context. And what we did, and so for you guys online, you guys will have a part in this as well, just in going forward to this series, either in the chat or just online or wherever you can jump out and reach out and touch. Let us know what verse that you have heard that you believe is out of context, and you want us to preach that and put it into our series for the Out of Context series. But what the idea is, we did last time with the Out of Context series, and we're picking it up in Context Clues, is that there are Bible verses that we kind of live our lives around or have heard, grew up hearing, and it's like we've taken them, but they've been out of context. And we know what happens when you take a Bible verse out of context. We know what happens when you say, this is what God said, and you lift it up. When you move something out of context, you can pretty much do what you want to do with it, even though it's not the right thing. And so last time when we were in this series, we went through the Luke verse, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. That's something you've always heard. People use that verse in an offering message, but when it has little to nothing to do about actual money, if you read the full context, we worked through Matthew chapter 7 when we talked through the verse of judge not and you be not judged, because people like to say, don't judge, don't judge, don't judge. But we have to put it in the context of what Christ was talking about in Matthew 7. So we did that and did some other verses. So if you can think of some stuff you want to hear, we're going to go to Romans later, not today. But we heard a verse that says, you can call things that not as though they were. Have you heard that verse before? We can call things that are not as though they were, but that is not talking about us. It's talking about God. So we're going to get into that later. But today we're going to jump into Philippians chapter 4. When you get your Bibles, swipe or flip Philippians chapter 4 online. Just type that in or say we got it, Philippians chapter 4. So we're looking here in terms of Philippians 4. I love what's happening here in Philippians 4. I love what we kind of see in Philippians chapter 4. We're going to read. When I say Philippians 4, you guys kind of probably already know where I'm going when I say Philippians 4. Anybody got a guess? Where am I going when I say Philippians 4? Anybody got a spitball? Somebody tell me what you think. Anybody? Now, don't cheat and go to Philippians 4 and say, no. Y'all laugh because that's what was happening. So Philippians, she said, yes. All right. So Philippians chapter 4, we're going to read verses 11 through 13. 11 through 13. This is one of the most famous verses that we hear. This is one of the most famous verses in the Bible. Of course, there's John 3:16. Of course, there's 23rd Psalm. But Philippians 4:13 is up there. It's ranking in the search. We're going to read Philippians 4, verse 11 through 13. Not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I've learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound in any and every circumstance. I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Y'all know that verse, right? And we always see Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. And already your stomach might be getting a little nervous because I might be on the way to knocking down a theology or an understanding you had about this verse that had been incorrect throughout your time. So what I love here, though, when we're looking at it, y'all remember the movie Waterboy? You know Bobby Boucher, right? Yeah. so Waterboy, right? And he was I guess you could say he was a football player, right? But there was a townsperson. The townsperson throughout the whole movie, whenever you saw Bobby Boucher on the scene, this townsperson played by Rob Schneider would say, "You can do it," right? Yeah, you can. Yeah, a little more rasp like you. Yeah, you can do it. And so everywhere he went, you had this shout out, "You can do it." Everywhere you found Bobby Boucher, "You can do it." It was this encouragement, if you will, telling him what he could do. Now, here's why I'm saying it in terms of this verse. When we've read this verse traditionally, we've heard this verse through the voice of that townsperson, "You can do it." And it's made us believe that anything we want to do, we can do. Now, here's where the theology crush comes in at. That's not necessarily true. Now here, I'm not, but before you say I'm leaving the church, this is heresy. I'm not, okay, here's the thing. If you have somebody who never studies, like, so Natalie's in school right now. You all know this. She's one of those that says, I'm going to go back and get another degree. That's her. But if she never studied, there would be no test she would pass, right? And that's she's a study. She's a good studier. But if she didn't study, there would be no test that she would pass. No matter how much her husband said and her kids said, you can do it. and like if you have never played baseball in your life, you can't wake up one morning and declare for the MLB draft and go to a team. No matter how much someone in your friend circle says, you can do it. Why is that? Because the you can do it of this talent person is diametrically opposed to the you can do it of Philippians 4:13. Let's back up a little bit. So Philippians, let's give it a little bit of context. So Philippians 4 is what we call a prison epistle, which means it's one of Paul's epistles or letters that he wrote to the church of Philippi and other churches as well when he was on lockdown. He was, I'm not going to ask the question, I don't want to incriminate any of y'all, but if you have been to jail before, or know anyone who's been incarcerated, typically when someone's being incarcerated, the letters that they write in jail are maybe different than the content of Paul's letters that he wrote incarcerated. So, but I just want to give the context of Paul being incarcerated during the writing of these letters. So we have Paul writing and he's saying to the church, let's go back to verse 11. He says, not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. Verse 12, I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound in any and every circumstance. I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance, and need. So what's the big idea here? We're looking at Paul, and so he has planted churches. Church Philippi, one of his locations, and tent maker by trade. But he had these churches who would give to him, right? They would give, they would support Pastor Paul. And he's writing in prison. Now, if you've been incarcerated or know someone who's been incarcerated, there's a thing called putting money on your books. Familiar? Oh, he said, no. So putting money on your books basically means, can you put money so I can buy some honey buns or some cigarettes or whatever I'm buying behind bars, right? It's basically old school form of like Zelle, right? Because they don't have cell phones in jail. So can't have Zelle. But so there's the putting money on your books of it all. And so Paul says, I'm not writing this to you. Watch this. He said, I'm in a place where I'm incarcerated. I'm in a place where typically I would need some things, but I'm not writing to you out of need, even though I'm in a space where I technically do need. What am I saying? That Paul is not writing to the people out there to say, I'm writing to you for you to give to me out of desperation. Now, there's a few things I want us to see there. That Paul is saying here that I have learned one, because there's some things he's learned here. He said, I've learned to be. Now, that's a big statement, because Paul is saying that I've learned out of all the things, because he's going to go through while we're on our few moments together today, we're going to go through the stuff Paul has learned. But one of the big lessons Paul has learned, he's learned to be. And here's what I want to ask you and I today, or have us reflect on. Have we just learned to be? Have you and I just learned to be content, or just to be okay just being? Or do we need to have the accoutrement or the extra in order to find ourselves in a place where we're okay? Like, my wife, she has this critique of me. Like, she'll be home, and I'll come home, and she'll be home just chilling in the bedroom, TV off, dog laying down, curled up on the end of the bed or on the floor or something. And she'll like reading her Bible or maybe just chilling, playing the puzzle game on her phone because it's puzzle game season. But I'll come in, I'll turn the TV on, and I'll bring a bunch of extra stuff. She's like, dude, I'm just trying to Exactly. So she's like, you just come mess up the atmosphere, mess up the mood, mess up the moment. Because she has been in a space of just being, right? Or even like when we're watching TV and if we're at the end of the night and we're just kind of chilling or whatever, I'll have as you may have heard her lodge this complaint. He always got this bang bang shoot 'em up stuff on TV. Instead of just, it's like, why is your mind so loud? Now, she says her thing is she's comfortable just being. Like, think about this. Like our kids, and maybe your kids too, they get to a point of, or even at any age, like for parents, we're okay on the weekend if we don't do nothing. She agrees. If the weekend comes, we are okay staying within the four walls of the place that we pay for electricity for, right? We're going to enjoy the running water, the electricity, the Wi-Fi, and the air or heat, depending on the season, because the whole week has been crazy and it's been full of work. But if you and I have children, which we do, they're going to say, what are we doing today? After 5 minutes sitting, I am bored, because they have never learned to be. And so Paul is saying, I'm here in this space of being. And the root word here is a Greek word. I'm going to butcher it. It says atarkes, which comes from the word self, and archeo, to suffice. So Paul is saying, I've learned here, watch this, to have an idea or an air of self-sufficiency. I have an air of self-sufficiency. So Paul is saying, I've learned, we're going to get through how he's learned this, but he's saying, I've learned, I need stuff, but watch this. Oftentimes the needs that we have grip us to the point of desperation. Oftentimes the needs that we have grip us and drive us to the point of acting outside of or not being content with just being anymore. And so I love this because Paul's teaching us something that's very antithetical to culture. Paul is saying, I know that this is what is lacking in my life from a material basis. But he said, I've learned though that, and he must have been listening to King's message. I've learned that the real win here is not just me getting something that's going to be materially beneficial, even though that's what would be an overt need. Like the man on the steps to the temple, he needed, I'm sure he ain't been working, he ain't got no money. He's like, so can you spare some change, good sir? I put him in old England, right? Can I spare some change, good sir? And Peter and John are like, hey, I don't have silver and gold, but such as I have, I give to you, rise up and walk. So there's a need that is bigger and deeper that Paul's saying, I got this already. So give or don't give, Paul is saying. That's not the deal here. So Paul's saying, I'm not being driven. I'm not being driven by what I'm seeing or the circumstance that I'm in. So watch this. Paul is giving us the idea. Watch this. Paul is saying we are challenged by the idea of where circumstances grant our contentment. And we only got a few more points and we'll be done here. So Paul is saying right here, Paul is saying this. He says, there's a threshold of our contentment for many of us. Not for Paul. Paul's saying, I've learned this. But we're going to get to it in a moment, how he learned this. Because here's the thing. It don't just happen. Right? The default of our lives is not contentment. The default of our lives is not learning, is not the ability to be self-content. That's not our default. And so, but Paul says, I've learned this. That's why he cited this word throughout this whole section of verses 11 through 13. I've learned. He says, I've learned this, but the learning says, for us, begs the question to think about this. Think about this. What is your threshold? What is our threshold of contentment? Like, are we content? And this is why verse 13 indicts us, because we quote, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me, which is cool to say, but have you ever saw the end of it, but really didn't know what the beginning of it was? That's 4:13. I saw the end of it where Paul says, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me, But what on God's green earth does that mean? So what's our threshold? Like, think about this. On a daily basis, how content are we? Or have we been so gripped by the modern conveniences, the modern wants and needs, the grind, the hustle culture, all this stuff, that if we don't have the one thing that we're wanting, what everything else, all the other stuff that's present for us seems to lose its luster. What am I saying? My son, Miles, when he was younger, we laugh about this now. When he was like maybe, I forget how he was, he was younger, a lot younger, like even before elementary school. He would have a tablet and watching TV, right, on his tablet, and he would have all these other things happen. Have a good snack in his hand, some goldfish, some water, because even as a little guy, he didn't drink anything but water. He could have sitting on the couch in an air-conditioned house with this tablet in his hand, and he'll be watching, there used to be a thing called YouTube Kids. I don't know if that's a little thing anymore, but YouTube Kids. And he would be watching it, then we would hear a cry come out. It's buffering, it's buffering, if it started to buffer. But the buffering complaint took over. It made him forget everything else that was happening that was great in that moment. Because the threshold of contentment was the buffering was my breaking point. Even though I got these nice, cheesy, crunchy goldfish that aren't stale, this good water in this sippy cup, AC sitting on this couch, but the buffering was my breaking point. So what am I saying? I'm saying to you and I is that we have to be people who start to examine what's our threshold of contentment. Because the way we approach God oftentimes puts our threshold of contentment in question. Because we do with God more complaining about what we don't have than we do being grateful about what we do have. Like many times our prayers include more God, give me, and complaints about what I don't have versus God, I'm grateful for the things that I do have. One thing I loved about church growing up is that the old folk, the deacons, they would go up and they would give a testimony, right? And you guys might have experienced this, but the deacons would often say things like, they would start off the testimony saying, first I'm going to give thanks to God who's the head of my life, and to pastor and first lady, that whole intro. But then they would go in, start thanking God for being 6 feet above the ground. You've heard grandparents say, they thank God for like these simple things that we take for granted. And they're thanking God for that. Like even when my wife talks to her dad on the weekends, how you doing, Dad? And he'll talk about how he's grateful for these things that we often take for granted. But her dad is advanced in years. And there's something that you learn later in life that you don't typically grab onto earlier in life. That as you get older, some of that stuff stops mattering. And you really start to grab onto the stuff that really matters. So Paul is saying that I've learned to be, and I've learned to have a threshold of contentment that's just open. Because what it says is I'm so locked into you that no matter where it is that I find myself, I'm good. I'm good. Like, Paul's the person that you know that will sleep on the floor. Like, have you had a sleepover before? And wasn't enough beds for y'all to sleep in? Everybody sleep in? You'll be like, I'll take the floor. And you'll make that pallet with a comforter and a sheet and grab one of the pillows from the back of the couch. Because the person sleeping on the couch got to move those anyway to have space to sleep on the couch. But I'm on the floor and I'm just as content. And I don't need all the. Now, would it being in the bed be nice? Sure, but I'm content. And so Paul's saying I'm that person. That bed or floor or couch or reclining car seat, I'm good. Now, you might be saying that Paul wasn't alive in 2026. I need all the things. I got to be able to talk to Siri. I got to be able to have all this. Do you know there's some people who, I know it's going to sound hard to believe, who don't have cell phones? Who could have cell phones, but don't have cell phones. Like there's a lot of celebrities like in Hollywood who don't have cell phones. Like I'll check my email and it makes their agents furious. But have you noticed oftentimes that having your cell phone glued makes you more anxious? Because you're always tapped in, locked in, scrolling, doing all the things. And so what I'm saying is Paul is saying, I have learned to be in a space where I'm not beholden to that. So what Paul's trying to get us to be is not, he's not trying to get us into some kind of twisted place of asceticism or stoicism, but he is trying to detach some stuff from us that's gotten too much of his claws into us. Because when we look at our modern cultural society, the claws are too much into us, which is why our contentment is so low. But one reason is, Paul said, you have not learned it yet. You ain't learned it yet. So here he goes. He goes in. Something up there on top of the roof. Something on the roof. Okay, so Paul goes in, and he wants us to ask this question. Ask ourselves, are we really content? Are we content? Or does our contentment rely on needing something extra? I know, it's okay. They wanted to come to church too, but they're on the roof. Probably a squirrel. Can you see it? We love a squirrel. Okay, so ask yourself, are you content or do you need something extra? What do you need to be content? What else do you need to be content? I remember Biggie Smalls would say things like, more money, more problems. Because oftentimes we think that if I had more, God, I'd be okay. But have you noticed that people who have more are still not okay? Because the idea of more is wanting more. Like once you've gotten the car that you want, the new car comes out and I want that one too. It's the Violet Beauregard of it all. Y'all don't know what I'm talking about because I'm aging myself. More, daddy, more. Yeah. Yeah, it's the Willy Wonka of it all. It's the Violet Beauregard of it all, right? So it's things that even once I get the thing that I thought that I wanted, the greed is so in me because watch, contentment is not default, but greed is default. Why is greed default? Because we were conceived and born in sin. That's a whole other idea we can get into later. You'll be like, I'm not no sinner. No, you are. Until Jesus comes and cleanses. What I'm saying. So that's why greed oftentimes is the first go-to. Hence why our kids, even when they first start talking and moving around, then you go in the Nemo section. It's like mine. The selfishness is already, possession is already, it's early. And when they learn to share, the default, I even said it, when they learn to share. You teach your kids to share. You don't teach them to take the toy, but you taught them to share. Because the default is not contentment. The default is not sharing. So Paul says, in order for the contentment to come into our lives to make it impact us right now, is to learn it. So we got to go into learning. So go in. So you learn to contentment. And he says that I'm learning this, but it is a skill that I acquire. It's an acquired skill. You remember when you would say things to your grandparents, and they would say something like, or maybe even to a mom if you have an older mom or whatever, but they'll say things like, keep on living. Y'all ever heard that before? Keep on living. When we come to them with complaints or whatever it is, keep on living. Keep on living. And the idea behind that was not so much a gotcha as much as it was, there's stuff that you and I learn the more we're here. There's stuff that you and I learn the longer that we live. There's stuff you and I learn the longer we're around. There's stuff you and I learn the longer or the more we experience. That's why they say things like experience is the best teacher. Because when I'm experienced, there's stuff that I know that I didn't know before. There's stuff I can navigate that I couldn't navigate before. There's stuff that I failed at that I've learned now to succeed at. So there's a wide breadth of experience that I have of failures, of loss, of wins, of ups, of downs, of all these things. So Paul is saying that there's a learning that has to happen that does not happen when you are a baby. It does not happen when you are young. Like, for instance, you can learn something at 20. Like, have you noticed this? Have you noticed this? Have you noticed? I remember we were talking to somebody a long time ago. My wife told me the story. She was talking to somebody a long time ago about, I guess, our daughter. She was a teenager, and she was being a teenage daughter because teenage daughters are teenage daughters, if you've ever been there. And she was talking to another a teenage daughter who was past Arya in years, and she was telling Arya, hey, and telling my wife even, hey, they'll get to a point where I used to be like that when I was younger too. And I think she may have been in her 20s at this point. The other girl, she was like, when I was her age, I was that same kind of way. And then I came back some years later as an adult and had to apologize to my parents. And why is that? Now, I'm not saying go home and wait for apologies from your kids. What I'm saying is that at her teenage age, there were some things she thought she knew and had in hand. I know this already. I got this already. Like, you may have even been that teenager where you came to your parents, chest all puffed out, shoulders all back, and thought that you knew everything at a certain age. You know, a lot of times teenagers like to make parents think we don't know nothing or know anything. Sorry, the idea where you want to make us feel like, you know, you old, you don't know anything. And as a kid, you think you know all the things, right? And then when you have your own children, when you have your own family, when you get your own bills, that tide starts to shift a little bit. Like now, even I understand as an adult adulting for some time, I remember when it first hit me that money don't grow on trees. I remember when it first hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks because as a kid, I was like, Mom, write a check. If you know we shouldn't have any cash, write a check. Yeah. As if checks weren't coming from the same place the cash coming from. And the phrase would come out, money does not grow on trees, but it's not something I understood as a kid. But as an adult, once I realized that money doesn't grow on trees, and you could be technically funny and be like, well, the cash is made out of paper. Yeah. But I can't go cut a tree down and go pay for something. So what I'm saying is, there's a learning that comes the longer you're here. So Paul's saying, I've learned some things, but it's a skill that I acquired. So here's what I'm saying. When you have a skill you're acquiring, like, what is something that you're teaching yourself to do or learning to do? Anything? Anybody learning to anything right now? Teaching yourself to crochet, to build something, to weld. Are you learning anything right now? To go, okay. To golf. You said golf, right? Yeah. Golfing, aside from being expensive, hobby, it's also not easy. I remember going to Top Golf with a friend of mine, with my goddaughter and her dad, which is one of my buddies. He golfs, and he taught her to golf, and I was at Top Golf, and I'm golfing, just like having a baseball but pointed downwards, just all wrong. Like bowling. I see what you did there. I see what you did there. It's very Flintstone, right? And she got over there, and you could tell that she had been going some holes with her dad. The legs, the back posture, the way she held it, everything. And when she hit the ball, it looked like she had been doing this. But what am I saying? She didn't pick up a golf club. She wasn't a prodigy that got up one day just to play golf. But she went to the golf club with her dad. She went to putt-putt. She went to the 18 holes. Maybe she played 9. But she was learning this skill to now be at a place where she could do what she's doing. Now, she's not a professional golfer, but she's way miles ahead of me. And then everybody person goes to Top Golf just recreationally. What am I saying? It's a skill she learned. So when you are trying to be content, there's a learning that I have to say, God, teach me not just to be content, but help me to seek out the things that I can learn to be content. What does that mean? It means that I need to start to learn to maybe deny myself. We don't have to have everything that we want to have when we want to have it. There's a phrase that we don't really use much anymore, but it's a phrase called delayed gratification. Right? That I don't have to have everything that I want at the time that I want it. There's a character that's built, a patience that's built, the more that I might wait for something to happen. But because I am in this culture and society that says I got to get it right now, I often will do things and behave in ways that are not God-honoring because I am not content with where I am. So Paul says, learn it. He says, learn it. So he goes in and says, I'm learning this skill. So I'm learning to do something that separates me from others. So I've learned to be somebody who can deal with the haves and the have-nots. there's the Liam Neeson of it all. It says, don't have money, but have a very special set of skills. Y'all seen Taken? Very special set of skills. Yeah, all the Takens. Taken 5, yeah. Now, in my ears, it sounded like you said Tekken. Y'all remember Tekken? A whole other subject, right? Video game. So, it's a skill set that Paul and Liam Neeson have that's different, that sets him apart. So Paul says, out of everyone that I'm in party with, that what separates me is my contentment. So what separates us as believers is I'm not always grasping for more. Whatever place I find myself and I can be buttoned up and I'm okay there. God, there's a song we used to sing back in the day. It says, any way you bless me, I'll be satisfied. God, however you see fit to show up in my life or answer my prayers, I will be satisfied. But the modern cry of Christians and Christian churches is, God, any way you bless me, swipe right, I want that next one. Because it's not, if you look at biblically at the Old Testament, New Testament, these Christians and these Old Testament Jews, the Christians and first century Christians, stuff like that, they would look at us now like, what is wrong with y'all? When did God's presence and God showing up not become enough? When did God being God and putting us wherever he puts us, allowing whatever he allows, not become enough for us? Like imagine if I went to my wife and we're on a date, talking, laughing, having a good time. And then and the waitress walking by, I'm like, man, babe, she's cute. Could she come sit with us too? I need more. Imagine the beating that I would probably get. The butter knife in the chest. Because I'm asking for more. Because what I have at the moment is not enough. And it's oftentimes the reach for more that gets us in trouble. It is the reach for more that makes us reach oftentimes out of our means and out like if you look at even just us on a regular basis, like money-wise, oftentimes when we're in financial trouble, there are some times when things are just crazy and bad. That is a thing. But there's a segment of people. I don't know the stats, but you may have even looked over our own lives at times and said, okay, I made a reach that I shouldn't have made. Like, have you ever had a bad day? I'm like, I'm going to go do retail therapy. Knowing good and well that you don't really have the means for retail therapy. And now you have a credit card bill from that department store from just your credit card that you're paying now for the next few months. You couldn't really afford to pay, but because you weren't like content, like the stuff in your closet wasn't enough for you because of how you were feeling emotionally that day, so it made you reach. So what God is saying to us is when we lose contentment, it makes us reach outside of ourselves. It ends up in a worse place oftentimes than you and I were before, versus being just content where we are. Now, here's what I'm not saying, and we're going to be done a little bit. Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying don't be ambitious, like to get promoted at work. I'm not saying don't do things that are going to better your life if you feel like, but what I'm saying is that there is a contentment that we don't have that we need to have. The Bible says that godliness with contentment is great gain. Because sometimes we just need to be content. Like, have you ever gone to somebody's house? Just a husband and wife. And it's like 7 bedrooms. Do you know that family at all? You don't know that family? Okay. Husband and wife. Let's throw a kid in. And it's 7 bedrooms. Let's help them out. 6 bedrooms. And ask yourself, really what, why, how? Just you and your little son or daughter. Why is there 6,000 square feet? Not anybody's pocketbook. But oftentimes, if you have conversations, I've noticed in certain circles, so I've been in certain circles, where people will buy more and do more because it's the way they feel like they need to represent themselves amongst the people they're around. Like even, there's a temptation even for me, like being around, like at basketball tournaments, stuff like that, There's like parents like with like for real money. But what I'm not going to do is front like I got the for real money, like y'all got the for real money when we're out and about. Like if I go to your house to go pick your son up and it's pull him to a mansion, I'm like, oh, well. And even my own son will be like, Dad, I love their house. Dad. I'm like, oh, cool, you can go visit. But that's not what you got when you come back home. Because there's a contentment we have to establish and not just go reaching for more and more just because it's what everybody else has or is doing. So Paul says, I've learned to be. We talk about the threshold of contentment. Then he goes in. He says, to content, I know how to be brought low, how to abound in every circumstance. I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. All right, give me a few more minutes. We're going to be up out here. So Paul is saying, at this point, it is the ups and downs that have taught him how to be content. He said in verse 12, he says, I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound in every circumstance. I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. So he said, I've learned how to be high on the hog and in the hog pen. But he said, I've learned, not just that he learned, we learned how. That's important. I learned how. Listen to the word he used, how. Have you ever fallen before? And have you ever fallen, or let's make it back. Have you ever saw somebody fall and then said to yourself, man, that was a graceful fall? Or have fallen yourself and say, man, that was a graceful fall for me. Like you're walking and you fall, but then you kind of inflate off and like you're doing a jump shot. Because it is the how at that point. Not that just you fell, but it's, or like if you're playing a sport and you fall, there's a way that you fall where you can break a wrist. And there's a way that you fall that you don't break a wrist. Because it's the how that you fall that determines how your next getting up is. So Paul is saying, I learned how to abound, learn how to be brought low, learn how to be exceeding, learn how to have nothing. So there's a way, even how that you have, that informs your contentment. There's a place that you learn how to have not that informs your contentment. And so Paul says you can have money or have material stuff and be content or not be content. It's all in the how. The how even informs our language and communication. When somebody says something to you, it's how they say it that upsets you. It's not always what they say. Sometimes it's how, more often than not, it's how they say it. Why'd you say it to me that way? Because you can say something that could be harsh or biting, but because of how you say it, it is well received. So Paul says, how do I fall? How do I have and how do I have not is going to count for a lot. So look at your own lives. When you're at home, how are you content? How do you handle not having and how do you handle having? Like this is a place where I've learned, I've gotten to this place where my wife often be like, babe, you should shop for yourself. Well, I know you're never going to buy anything for yourself. So you got to, like, if you ever see me in a new something, it's because my wife, she encouraged me to get it. Because on my own, I'm not going to get it. I'm content with whatever I have in my closet. That's just me, good, bad, or indifferent. But what I'm saying is like you could have stuff in your closet and be grumpy. You can have a bunch of stuff in your closet and be grumpy. Because Paul addresses the how. He said, I learned how to be in these spaces. And I think that's important because it's not just enough to learn contentment, but how to be. There's a way that you are content. Because some of us have false humility and false contentment. Oh, I don't have much and I'm just okay. But then you're really complaining and then grumbling under your breath about what you don't have. Because the how is informing you. The how is messing with you. The how is getting to you. So Paul says, I learned this. I have this how. And he says, I'm trying to live in a way that no matter where I find myself, I can do this. And then he goes in, I learn the secret. Learn the secret. Now, what do we learn about secrets? Any of y'all, there's this movie I like, a movie I liked back in the day called The Skulls. It's about secret societies with Paul Walker, Vin Diesel, I think. Vin Diesel, I know Paul Walker. It's an old movie about secret society at Ivy League College. There are secrets that are for initiates that you learn. Like, so Larry is here today, and he's in a fraternity. He's Kappa Alpha Psi, Fraternity Incorporated. There's stuff when he crossed over or stuff that he learned just throughout the process of pledging that I don't know. I'd have to be a Kappa or whatever Greek letter organization it is to learn the secrets. Why is that important? Because when I see Larry, if I see Larry, I'm like, man, and he's doing something Kappa related, I'm just going to use this as an example. I feel how you feel about Greek little organizations, whatever, but I'm using an example. And I see something him related, I'm like, man, that's so cool. How can I do that, man? How can I be down? He'll say, well, you need to be in school or do grad chapter, but this is how you would do that. But I can't tell you. He's not going to tell me the inside stuff until I go through the initiation. So why am I saying that? Because when Paul says I learned the secret, the word he's using there is like initiation. He had been initiated in to get to this place of contentment. There was some stuff I had to go through and recite and be a part of that now has him at the spot of being content. And so, but it's the way I live my life based on the secret that I was initiated into that you saw externally that made you say, how do you do that? Like, I don't know if Larry stepped in college. Did you step? Okay, you said yes? Okay, of course not. So, if some people see the canes and they'll see the shimmy and they're like, oh, that's cool. How do you do that? Oh, I can't teach you that, bro, unless you. So it's the external markings of these organizations that make you say, how do I? And so Paul says, people see my contentment on the outside. How do you do that? Shh, here's the secret. And so we have to live our lives in such a way that says, people can look outside and say, how are you doing that? Like right now, we're in a precarious position in the world. Wars, finances, rumors of AI collapse, which is holding up our economy right now, all these things that are crazy going on. And there are some people who are content right now because they never, when things are going great, they didn't overreach. And so now when things are going bad, they're like, I'm good. Good. The most content people right now are the off the grid people. Off the grid. They got solar panels. They're growing stuff on their own. They're making the occasional trip to the store, but not so much where it messes with them. What am I saying? I'm saying that they have found a contentment that works its way through all the situations because of their detachment from the stuff that we've allowed to put his claws into us. I'm not saying everybody needs to move out off the grid, but I am saying there is something to the detachment that says I don't need to let that control me in this moment. Right? And so now they're not swayed by what sways us. And that's what we're looking at in Paul. So we go back to that initial word at the beginning, self-sufficiency. The sufficiency is not in himself, though, as much as it is in God. He said, I learned once I have God, that's all I need. Like, for instance, how many of y'all got several credit cards? Several. More than one. But sometimes there's just one you carry because it wraps up all of them. Like, somebody, I may have a Visa, MasterCard, yada, yada, but somebody may have an Amex card, and that's all they carry. Because this is going to manage everything for me, right? There's some people who stop carrying cards at all because they got their phone, and they Apple Pay, or Google Pay, or Samsung Wallet, whatever it is, because it picks up everything for them. So what we find out here is that so Paul's saying, I've learned in all this that I don't need all the other stuff that I'm holding now. My sufficiency is in God, not all the extra stuff. So if my foundation is God, and I came into this with God, when everything leaves me, I still got God, because that's not leaving. So I am allowed now to still be in a spot that's good, no matter what happens, because I got God. Now here we go. We're coming home now. So we go here. It's verse 13. It says, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. I love it because he says, now at this point I've learned competence. I've learned competency. That I can do everything through Christ that strengthens me. Now let you understand that he's not talking about ability as much as he is endurance. For instance, you can try declaring for the draft at 60. You can try. You probably won't get picked. But I thought you said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But the prayer is not about ability. The prayer is not about ability. The prayer is about endurance. And I think that is what messes us up, because when we quote Philippians 4:13, I'm asking God, give me the strength to endure it. And I know that doesn't work well with our theology in this modern era, because I don't want to endure nothing. But I'm learning, God, help me to endure. I know people who've done the Tough Mudder before. They would just call it the Mudder and Spartan races and stuff like that. Didn't you do something like that? I haven't done that. I don't know that I ever will do that, especially now that way my body works. But there's an endurance that you have. There's an endurance you have in that. And like Larry runs now. He's a running club guy. There's an endurance that takes place when you run. What I'm saying is, my prayer when I'm saying Philippians 4:13 now to God is, God, I'm not so much praying this prayer, asking this ask in terms of you giving me the ability to do it. Yes, now does God give you the ability to do stuff? Yes. The Bible says in him we live, we move, we have our being. There is an ability to God, yes, that helps you be able to do something. But there's also what Paul is talking about here is I'm in prison right now. I'm under security where they're surrounding me right now. So God, the 4:13 that I'm talking about here is, God, I'm asking you, or the reason why I can do all things is because you've given me the endurance factor. There's an endurance that you and I need to have, even in this moment that we're living in 2026. God, help me to endure. There's an old school song that says, Lord, help me to hold out until my changes come. And the first verse says, the way may not be easy. You never said that it would be. But when it gets tough, and it goes in and talk about how I'm asking God to help me hold out. So in 2026, my prayer for you and I is, God, give us endurance. God, help me to stay consistent and stay sold out and stay locked into you throughout everything I go through, because whether I'm high on the hog or in the hog bin, I know you've got me still. So that's what God's trying to get us to be into today, that there is something in us that has an endurance factor to it. Can we endure? Can we hold on? That's what Paul is saying, because Paul is imprisoned at this moment. And he's saying, God, help me endure. Help me endure. So here's the deal. As we get out, Larry, you can play music to shut me up. So when he's talking about the all things, what he's saying to us is there's basically wherever, and this goes back to the earlier thing about the threshold, wherever I find myself. Like, here's what I want to ask us. You don't have to answer out loud, because we may still be processing this and thinking through this. Could you be content and still tapped into your Savior no matter where you found yourself? That's a big question. Because when I look at our world, people find themselves in various places. So if I find myself in a place that's not great, am I still content like I was in a place that's great? Like, I remember, this is recent. I was praying. I was like, in my prayer, I'm like, God, here was the temptation. Here was the temptation before I started praying. It was like, it's not great right now. I'm going to skip praying today. I'm going to be honest. This is the temptation. This is how the enemy tried to get me to fall for it. This is very Matthew 4 when he tried to tempt Jesus. I'm like, things aren't great today. Money's funny, change is strange. I'm going to just skip this prayer moment. I'm not going to wake up early. I'm not going to go downstairs and get my Bible or sit on the chair I sit in, and I'm not going to leave that blanket folded up. I'm not going to do anything. This is not today. And a few seconds later, I was like, I got up out of the bed, went downstairs, got on my knees, and began to pray and worship and thank God. So I'm like, God, the consistency of the way I need to worship you and be locked into you I'm not going to let it be predicated on where things are in my life. Because you've never been that way for me. I love that, because God's never been, if God was to us the way we are to him when it comes to consistency, we would be screwed. Pardon my French. It's not really French, but we would be messed up, because God would be in and out of our lives based on how God felt that day or how we were acting that day. But God's been as consistent. So I'm like, God, I want to be consistent, because the thing is, the good times or the things going well, that'll come around again. I'll get to that point again. But if I lay off of my consistency with you, if I lay off of being content with you in this moment, who knows if it comes around again? Because I've shown you, God, that I can't be trusted at any spot. And God's thing for us in this moment is to be trusted at any spot. And it's going to be infectious and contagious, because you're going to have people in this moment, when you go out into the world, go to your job, your friend circles, your families, and they know what's happening in the world, even in your life, and you are saying, I'm still content. They'll look at you crazy at first because it's not very culturally in line, but they're going to know how they'll pull you aside like they did to Jesus, like Nicodemus said to Jesus on the side. How does that happen? How are you doing that? Keen, how are you not going crazy when this is going on? How is this? How are you maintaining? But first we got to learn the lesson of how to be content. And then we can make the declaration, God, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Amen? That's all I got. Come on and give